200 years ago, on October 23, 1819, the pioneer company of American Protestant missionaries departed aboard the Thaddeus from the Long Wharf in Boston. On their 160th day out of Boston, March 30, 1820, they reached the islands at Kawaiahao. It's not clear why, but the missionaries stayed around Kawaiahao for a few days. They finally anchored at Kailua on April 4th. Then on April 11th, the Thaddeus Journal notes, "The decision of the government is that 2 of the brethren with their wives and 2 of the native youths should remain here and be furnished at the public expense with lodgings, water and fuel, and with fresh provisions, and allowed to commence their work with the promise of protection, and that the rest of our number should be allowed to proceed to Oahu, there to be accommodated with convenient houses." When the missionaries arrived on Oahu, they lived in the grass houses provided by traders and ship captains in an area just mauka of the fort, mauka what is now the Aloha Tower area. The king controlled all construction in the kingdom and had given orders to Boki, the governor of Oahu, to construct a group of houses for the missionaries. Boki delayed building any hale pili, grass houses, for the missionaries. He wanted no interference and rejected the mission's requested location just inland of the main village. Boki argued that his farmers already used the land for growing taro. An April 22, 1820 journal entry notes, "The governor does not yet step forward to furnish us with houses of any kind, and we are a little embarrassed. We find some difficulty in procuring storerooms for all of our baggage because those storehouses, which are safe, are generally occupied, and we fear to expose many articles in what are generally termed straw houses, as they are so liable to destruction by fire and so easily broken open." Boki suggested a spot 3/4 of a mile from Honolulu on the high road to Waikīkī, on an extensive plain with a view of the open sea in front and lofty mountains and fertile valleys in the rear. It was on an arid plain, about a half a mile from the landing, then some distance from the village, but now included in it. Maria Loomis saw the benefits of Boki's suggested location, as it would put them away from the bustling activity of the harbor and the village. The curious and social nature of the Hawaiians challenged the women, and being further away from town had its advantages. In the traders' houses, Loomis recorded, "Our doors and windows are daily darkened by gazing natives." At a place called Kawaiahao, Boki began to build this row of connected houses some 3 months after their arrival. The typical construction of several weeks moved into several months. In late September, the mission family finally moved from the houses of the ship captains to the new hale pili. This line of buildings became known as Missionary Row. By this time, Samuel Whitney and Samuel Ruggles and their wives had left to begin a mission station on Kauai, and Elijah Loomis to Kawaiahao. So only Hiram and Sybil Bingham, Daniel Chamberlain with his wife and 5 children, and Maria Loomis and child needed to be housed in the new location. The women immediately adapted each house to their own spatial requirements. Bingham notes, "We took possession of the premises assigned to us by the government and the buildings which had been chiefly erected by Boki in the course of 4 months from our landing. These houses, cottages or huts, tabernacles, barns or sheds, for it is somewhat difficult to say what term would give the true idea of the structure, were built in the usual style of Hawaiian architecture by natives, the light timbers being brought on their shoulders some 14 miles, and the grass 3. Such habitations being erected for the pioneer missionaries, They introduced some improvements, partitions, window frames, shutters, etc., and afterwards gave them better models. On April 23, 1820, the Protestant missionaries held a church service for chiefs, the general population, ship's officers, and sailors in the larger room in Reverend Hiram Bingham's house. This room was used as a school room during the weekdays, and on Sunday the room was Honolulu's first church auditorium. It was a forerunner to what we know today as Kawaiahao Church, and the first foreign church on Oahu. There were several other buildings that served as a Honolulu church meeting house until the present stone house, Kawaiahao, was completed in 1842. Shortly after arrival, the missionaries built a wood frame house. The wood-framed mission house, built in 1821, was one of the first wood frame buildings built in Hawaii. The frame house still stands on the grounds of the Hawaiian mission houses near Kawaiahao Church on the Makai side of King Street. It is the oldest intact Western structure still standing in the Hawaiian Islands. The timbers of Maine white pine were cut and fitted in Boston in 1819 and came around the Horn on the brig Thaddeus with the first mission company in April 1820, arriving first in Kona. The frame of the house arrived in Honolulu on Christmas morning of that year on board the ship Tartar. Since the lumber for this New England plan type was actually pre-cut prior to shipment, it could also be considered, in a broad sense, a very early example of prefabrication. In July 1821, the missionaries had raised enough money and started to plan a church. The site was just makai of the existing Kawaiahao Church. A month later, they began to build a 22 by 54 foot building, large enough to seat 300. This first church building was built of thatch and lined with mats. However, it had glass windows, doors, a wooden pulpit, and 2 rows of seats separated by an aisle. In August of that year, Captain Templeton presented a bell from his ship to be used at the church. Within a year, Hiram Bingham began to preach in the Hawaiian language. 4 services a week were conducted, 3 in Hawaiian, 1 in English. Congregations ranged from 100 to 400. By the end of the year, the church was expanded. The church conducted its first funeral in January 1823 for Levi Parsons Bingham, the infant 16-day-old son of Hiram and Sybil Bingham. After several subsequent thatched churches, between 1836 and 1842, Kawaiahao Church was constructed. Revered as the Protestant mother church, this structure is an outgrowth of the original mission church founded in Boston, and is the first foreign church on Oahu. The stone church, as it became to be known, is in fact not built of stone, but giant slabs of coral hewn from ocean reefs. These slabs had to be quarried from underwater. Each weighed more than 1,000 pounds. Natives dove 10 to 20 feet to hand chisel these pieces from the reef, then raised them to the surface, loaded some 14,000 of the slabs into canoes, and ferried them to shore. Following 5 years of construction, the stone church was ready for dedication ceremonies on July 21, 1842. The grounds of Kawaiahao overflowed with 4,000 to 5,000 faithful worshipers. King Kamehameha III, who contributed generously to the fund to build the church, attended the service. Kawaiahao Church was designed and founded by its first pastor, Hiram Bingham. Hiram left the islands on August 3, 1840, and never saw the completed church. Kawaiahao Church is listed on the state and national registers of historic sites. To remember and learn from the past, as well as best portray the mission experience. Hawaiian Mission Houses has a hale pili under construction on the Hawaiian Mission Houses grounds, in about the same place as the hale pili of Missionary Row. It is a representation of the hale, described in journals and letters of William and Clarissa Richards, Charles and Harriet Stewart, and Betsy Stockton, all of whom lived in the hale that this reproduction represents. The dimensions primarily follow the Richards description. Hawaiian Mission Houses is honored to be named for a programmatic award from Historic Hawaii Foundation's 2020 Preservation Honor Awards program for the construction of the hale pili. The hale pili project is being awarded for the construction of this historic site to represent the many hale pili that were the original building type on this site in the early 19th century, and for the program to train craftsmen into traditional building trades. The hale pili is built adjacent to the wood frame house built in 1821, so artificial pili grass and fire protection is critical to not risk damage to the adjoining.